When it comes to the NFL, there is no position that draws eyes quite like the quarterback does. Everything you do is going to be magnified. If you're making mistakes, people are going to hear about it. Look at Deshaun Watson, look at Zach Wilson. And on the other end, most of the time, if you're playing well, that's going to get you noticed. Look at some of the great seasons we had last year. Joe Burrow, he was in MVP conversations in spite of his team not even making the playoffs because of his play. Look at Lamar Jackson, who many people said should have won the MVP, as well as Josh Allen, the MVP winner, of course, who didn't have his most productive season, but he really ironed out his efficiency and looked like a complete product. But sometimes there's that middle ground in which a quarterback, they do a lot of good things, but they don't quite get the same level of recognition for it. Enter Baker Mayfield, who statistically had one of the best seasons we saw from a quarterback last year. Statistically, a really all-time great kind of season from a quarterback. And yet, I feel like it flies under the radar. We need to talk about Baker Mayfield. 4,500 yards, 41 passing touchdowns, and a 71.4% completion percentage were the numbers for Baker Mayfield last year. That yardage puts him at third in the league. The touchdowns put him at second, and that completion percentage is good for third as well. And if you count quarterbacks who played all 17 games, that completion percentage goes up to number 2 behind only Jared Goff. Now, it would be one thing if he put up these numbers in a season where every single quarterback was at the top of their game, and it was a very heavily offensive, quarterback-focused kind of year. But for as many quarterbacks that had great seasons this year, from, of course, Baker Mayfield, to Jared Goff, to Joe Burrow, to Lamar Jackson, there were a lot of guys who had down years, or outliers, based off what we're used to seeing from them. Patrick Mahomes, with his lack of weapons over there, not having Rashee Rice, he didn't put up the numbers we're used to seeing from him. Josh Allen, he was a league MVP, but in many eyes, he sacrificed a little bit of his explosivity in favor of efficiency, so his numbers were down a little bit. Justin Herbert had his most efficient season, but it was a far cry from the times where he was throwing for 5,000 yards. If you're going by the numbers, Baker Mayfield had a better season than those guys. And that's not to say Baker is the next Patrick Mahomes, but think about where you would rank him among the best quarterbacks in the league right now. Would he make your top 10? That's a conversation, but I don't think it necessarily should be. I think this season should have solidified Baker as at least a top 10 quarterback. Because, yes, numbers absolutely fluctuate, you know? There's going to be years where Mahomes has a down year. He's not going to be throwing for 50 every season. He came into the league, 50 passing touchdowns his first year really starting, and it's been down since. Of course, you can't maintain that consistency. That's going to happen. There were outlier seasons, but what we saw from Baker Mayfield last year, it feels like he should at least be considered a top 10 quarterback. In many people's eyes, I think they would put maybe, I've seen Dak Prescott over him. I've seen Jordan Love over him. I don't think that's right. I'm high on Jordan Love. I think he has the potential to be a great quarterback in this league. If he just puts the ball in harm's way a little bit less, I think Jordan Love could be great, the next Packers franchise quarterback. But I think based off what we've seen from them at this point in their careers, I think I would solidly put Baker above Jordan Love. When you're discussing these fringe borderline top 10 guys who are all hovering around that range, I think Baker Mayfield stands above them based off what we saw last year. And there are two major arguments I see that point against this, that say Baker Mayfield, what he did last year, is not equivalent, does not translate to who he truly is as a player, who he really is as a quarterback. The first thing is the weapons. Baker Mayfield is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, and that offense is loaded. You've got Rachaad White, one of the best pass-catching backs in the entire league, as well as Bucky Irving, who burst onto the scene, especially in those last couple months, as an elite running back. You've got Mike Evans, who consistently, every single year of his career, has had over 1,000 yards. You throw the ball to him, he is going to catch it. He's going to get his yardage. You can absolutely trust Mike Evans more than almost any other wide receiver in the league when it comes to consistency. Then you've got Chris Godwin, who a couple years ago people were saying was just on par with Mike Evans, and he is one of the best number 2 wide receivers in the entire NFL. You also had a solid tight end in K. Dotton, as well as a rookie wide receiver in Jalen McMillan who showed flashes. And this year he's got another first round wide receiver. There's a lot of talent on the Buccaneers offense. And we didn't even talk about the likes of Tristan Wirfs on the O line. And so, with that, when you have that kind of weaponry in your arsenal, people can use that to discredit a quarterback. Look at Patrick Mahomes when he burst on the scene, when instantly, like from day one starting, he was regarded as the best quarterback in the league for the numbers he was putting up. Some people kind of looked at that and said, hey, he's got Tyreek Hill. He's got a great mind at the head coaching spot, Andy Reid, and he's got Travis Kelce. He's got the weapons. He's got the coach. If you put anybody else in that position, they would do very, very well in the same way that Mahomes did. There were some people that said that. I'm not saying it was right, but that was a conversation. And so that conversation can carry over to something like Baker Mayfield with the weapons that he has, with the offensive coordinator that he had. But the thing about that is Baker didn't have those weapons all year. Mike Evans played 14 games out of 17. Chris Godwin went down with a season-ending injury. There were times this season where Baker Mayfield, he couldn't look to Mike. He couldn't look to Godwin. He could not look to his top two wide receivers. He had to improvise, and that's what the best quarterbacks do. When everything around them is falling apart, when they have to find something new, something else to get them through, and find a way to remain productive, that's what great quarterbacks do, and that's what Baker Mayfield did. He went to Rachaad White. He went to Cade Otton for a couple games. When Evans and both Evans and Godwin were out, Baker found other ways to contribute and produce, and his numbers remained steady. And that's a testament to the kind of quarterback that he was. It wasn't just the weapons. It was him and the way that he was able to execute. He went games without Evans, games without Godwin, and he still produced. He still put up numbers and still maintained his status as a great quarterback. And then we get to the second primary problem that people have with Baker last season. That is his interceptions. He threw 16, and that's a mark that you do not want to hit. 16 picks is a mark where people can look and say, yes, he threw for a lot of touchdowns, but he also took away a lot of opportunities from his team by the amount of times that he put the ball in harm's way. So how much can you really weigh those touchdowns when he had so many picks as well? This is why, someone like Justin Herbert last season, he didn't throw nearly as many touchdowns, but he had very few turnovers, and people love that efficiency. They love the touchdown interception ratio. But here's the thing. You can look at those picks and you can say that, yes, Baker, at times, he absolutely put the ball in harm's way. But at the same time, you can't call him inefficient because he completed 71.4% of his passes last season. That is an extremely high mark. 7 out of 10 times, when the ball left his hands, he was completing that pass. That is an incredibly high kind of rate. It was third in the league, as I stated previously, behind Tua Tagovailoa and Jared Goff. And Tua, he only played 11 games. So if you count guys who played the full season, he was only 2 behind Jared Goff. So I think at times you can point to that and say, yes, Baker, there were moments where he made a bad pass. Sure, that happens to everybody. But most of the time, he was very, very efficient. He was hitting a lot of his passes. And so with that, I don't think turnovers tell the full story in regards to the efficiency of Baker, in regards to how we should gauge his offensive production. So with that in mind, now that we've kind of got the rebuttals out there to the counter arguments, what is all of this for? What does it matter that Baker Mayfield was more efficient than the interceptions say? What does it matter that he didn't always have his weapons with him? Well, I think it's time that we start respecting what Baker does just a little bit more. I think it's time that we make him a solidified top 10 quarterback in regards to public and media perception. My top 5, I think, is pretty set in stone, pretty concrete. I have, and a lot of this is interchangeable, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Jalen Hurts. And then when you get to that 6 to 10 range, it starts getting a little more iffy. You've got the Jared Goffs of the world. You have the Justin Herberts of the world. They are great, absolutely. I don't think there's much denying that, but you still have your questions about them. You have the questions about how much the Chargers' success last year, how much of that was on Herbert as opposed to the scheme, as opposed to the coaching. Jared Goff, I kind of view him in a similar position to Baker. How much of it was the weapons around him? How much of it was the coordinator? And if you're having conversations around Herbert, around Goff, For those same reasons, I think you should include Baker in that top 10 list. Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because he's got the numbers and he's got the same narratives that Goff and Herbert have. So why, therefore, should you bring him down as though he is significantly below them? I don't think that should be the case. I think last year, what we saw from him was very, very impressive. And he should undoubtedly be a top 10 quarterback in this NFL league. And if he is to be a top 10 quarterback, why does that matter? Let's project him for this coming season. I think Baker has the potential to have a great season coming up. Because that Tampa Bay offense, it's only getting better for him. You've, of course, got Mike Evans, Mr. 1000. He's going to be there once again. Chris Godwin, he will come back. You have their first round wide receiver in Emeka Egbuka, who is going to be in prime position from day one to get out there and produce, playing alongside Mike. You, of course, have Jalen McMillan, who showed flashes last year. He's going to be their wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 when Godwin comes back. That's a great core 4 of wide receivers. Then you've got K. Dot at tight end. He is a very solid contributor. At running back, you have Bucky Irving, poised to take a sophomore leap. He was very, very impressive, especially in those last couple months of last season. And when you have a running threat like that, the Buccaneers have not had a running threat in quite a while. That was kind of the downfall of the last couple years of Tom Brady, in which he was still passing at an elite level, but their offense was so one-dimensional, teams were ready for the pass. But now you bring in somebody like Bucky Irving, teams have to prepare for that. And alongside Bucky Irving, you also have Rashad White, who I think is perfect for a 2 running back system. Because Rashad is a great pass-catching running back, but his flaws are apparent when he is your primary rushing back. So to have Bucky Irving able to take some of that rushing load off of him and allow White to excel what he does best at in catching the ball, I think that's huge. So you've got 2 guys out of the backfield. You've got a great core 4 wide receivers. You've got a very solid tight end, K. Dotton. And at quarterback, you have Baker Mayfield, who, as we saw last year, he can execute when you call on him. And overall, I think he's going to have another great year. Is he going to throw for 41 touchdowns again? I don't know. That's a lot of touchdowns to throw for any quarterback. And so with that, I think he deserves his flowers for what he did last season. But going into this season, I'm projecting 33 touchdowns, about that kind of range. And I think if he continues where he left off last year, we're going to need to be having even more conversations about Baker Mayfield, about where he is in that top 10. He might be closer to 7 than 10 kind of thing. And overall, based off what we saw from Baker last year, I don't think he gets talked about enough. And I think it's about time that we started putting respect on Baker's name. I think it's about time that we start having conversations about Baker Mayfield. He is a great quarterback in this league. He has found a home in Tampa Bay. And I think he's set up for success this coming season.